was a new trailer for Pokémon Sun and Moon, which reveals a ton of new information. It revealed 2 new Pokémon called Jangmo-O, a Dragon-type Pokemon, and Type Null, Type colon Null.
That was so confusing to read.
Yeah, it's a normal-type Pokemon that was created synthetically to hone the strengths of various other Pokemon. And they also revealed a puffy-cheeked Alolan Raticate. It also revealed new creatures called Ultra Beasts, which seem not to be Pokemon, but it's not super clear. They revealed one in particular called UB-01, whose description says its movements resemble a young girl's. So I'm actually convinced that that's somehow connected to the female rival in the game, the one who doesn't like battling Pokemon, and they were giving all those mysterious character descriptions about.
Yeah, it actually kind of looks similar to her outline too in her color scheme.
Yeah, like her outfit, I was thinking. It also revealed a few new characters in a group called the Aether Foundation, who supposedly cares for hurt Pokemon in a big lab called Aether Paradise, where they also conduct various research projects.
This sounds like a front for Pokemon testing.
Oh yeah,
just
absolutely.
Gonna say.
Yeah.
I was also very confused by Type Null getting a type, because it seems like if you're going to give it that name, you might as well just somehow make it work without a type.
Yeah.
Since, that's theoretically possible. It just doesn't get any bonuses or weaknesses.
Right.
I'm liking what they're doing with the themes, because I was not expecting anything like this to be tacked on to this Alola region from like a story perspective. I would totally have thought it would have been a little bit more backwater, a little less science fiction genetic manipulation, but
yeah,
cool.
I am in the opposite camp here. You remember how hyped I was for Team Skull?
Mm-hmm.
Scratch that. Scratch all of it. The Aether Foundation is obviously the real villainous team in this game. I just know it. They're dressed like freaks, which we kind of talked about when we discussed Team Skull, so that's the first and obviously the most important red flag. But then there's the name, which sounds super skeezy. The Aether Foundation just doesn't really sound like a group of Pokemon caretakers. And then there's that green scientist dude, Faba. He's definitely hiding something. But obviously what's going on here is that the Aether Foundation's experiments are creating the Ultra Beasts. And obviously for some kind of dastardly purpose, because really, I mean, to be honest, I just don't trust Game Freak to tell a story more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I'm really expecting this team to be up to some kind of shenanigans, and I really hope they're not, though, just because literally every single comment I've seen, on every story about this online, has been people going, they're the real bad guys, lol. And, if your entire fan base can guess it from, a 30-second clip and some screenshots, then that's a little frustrating.
Maybe that's a sign you're not telling your stories very well.
Yeah, hopefully Game Freak catches us off guard and there's a different twist we're not expecting, but I fully expect them to be up to some sort of nefarious goings-on.
This is like every Nintendo plot twist. They're all visible from a million miles away.
I mean, yeah, I hate having plots in Pokemon games just in general. I just don't think they go together well, fundamentally, at all.
Yeah, that I think is the bigger problem.
I love it when they have stories and narratives, but when they've got these big plots driving the games through on a grand scale, that's just not at all what I think Pokemon should be about. And on top of that, I think if it is going to have a cohesive storyline, that Game Freak just isn't the right developer to handle it.
They definitely need better dialogue writers if they're going to do an in-depth storyline.
I remember you and I were at the Pokemon Symphony and we were laughing at some of the footage that was one of the kids in X and Y said something like, "We're not so different, you and I, but we're pretty similar too. That's because we're different people, but we also have similarities." It's
yeah.
Well, that wasn't verbatim.
It's
but,
bad writing. The cutscene direction is generally not worth the story that they're trying to tell, even though the dialogue is bad.
Yeah.
And on top of it, when you try to focus on story and characters, the rest of the stuff suffers inevitably, because you have to have everything serve the story and the characters. And not the world and the things you do in it.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I think that they can tell really interesting stories. I really loved what they did with, AZ and X and Y. But, I just don't think they tell those stories well. And then there's also that issue that fundamentally, I don't think Pokemon is a series that should be about grand story arcs. They can have those things sprinkled in. They can tell them, on the sides, but they shouldn't be the core focus of the game. But I mean, hopefully I'm just sort of worried over nothing. Hopefully the Aether Foundation are the good guys and they don't mean that much to the story and everything. Pokemon's far and away the dearest to my heart of any franchise in any media, period. And every single generation since Red and Blue has focused more and more on story than the previous one. And I think Gen 2 struck the totally perfect balance. Gen 3's was a little heavier than I would have liked, but I think ultimately they did it pretty well. But, by Gen 6, it's just too much. And I don't know why they'd break the pattern now. I don't know why I thought Team Skull was...
So, I don't expect this whatsoever, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. So they also revealed that whole thing where the time of day in the Sun and Moon games is skewed by 12 hours, depending on which version you're playing. And so I'm wondering if the fact that we get the feeling that both of these teams are villains also plays into that, where in one of the versions you align more with the Aether Foundation, and in one version you align
so it's pulling a Gen 3.
more with...
That's entirely possible.
That could be cool.
Because, a lot of people are getting that feeling, well, the Aether Foundation seems like they're good, but they also seem kind of nefarious. And then Team Skull seems like they're nefarious, but
if they're against the Aether
they're
Foundation,
also kind of cool and misunderstood.
Yeah.
Well, if that is the route they go, then I hope they make me somehow like both teams instead of making me hate both teams, because I didn't want to side with anyone in Ruby and Sapphire.
Well, that's because the story in Ruby and Sapphire was terrible.
That's interesting. I would like that a lot better than just having a plot twist where the Aether Foundation are the bad guys.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's a little dangerous too, because we're talking about. I don't think that Game Freak is that good at telling stories, even though the stories they tell can be really good stories. It's the actual exposition and the narrative that they're not so good at executing. So I think that idea where it's Team Skull versus Team Aether, and the version of the game that you get sort of determines which one is the real villain, that can turn out really, really well if they can tell it right, but I don't know that they can tell it right. I think the idea really excites me, but I don't know that it'll actually do well in practice.
Sure.
Hello everybody, thank you for listening to this Nintendo Week clip, NWC. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to us here on YouTube for more highlights and discussion videos from Nintendo Week podcast, or subscribe to us on iTunes for weekly breakdowns of all your Nintendo news, discussion segments on subjects, games, and more, and tons of other features. Thanks for listening, and we will see you tomorrow with another NWC.